Thank you. Well, first let me say that it's a rare opportunity for me to come and speak to this council, and I'm deeply honored. Richard, thank you for letting me come, and Tom, thank you for those remarks. Instead of the published topic, I know that we all share a dream of peace in the Middle East. And this afternoon, I intend to review what has brought us to this present situation, the obstacles still before us, and some things that must be done to bring peace and justice to the region. The comments that I'm going to make will focus on some aspects that are not usually discussed freely and frankly in this country. I know the political sensitivity of these issues, but I'll be as accurate and as frank as I possibly can. I don't intend to run again for public office, and I have Secret Service protection the rest of my life. The three most basic premises are quite clear and simple. First, Israel's right to exist and to live in peace must be recognized and accepted by Palestinians and all other neighbors. Second, the killing of innocent people by suicide bombs or other acts of violence cannot be condoned. And third, Palestinians must live in peace and dignity. And permanent Israeli settlements on their land are a major obstacle to this goal. Let me first review the official position of the United States. From Dwight Eisenhower to the roadmap of George W. Bush, our policy has been that Israel's borders coincide with those of 1949. The United States has consistently stated since 1967 that UN Resolution 242 is binding on Israel as a foreign power that is occupying Palestinian territory. To quote its key commitments, the inadmissibility of the acquisition of territory by war and the need to work for a just and lasting peace in which every state in the area can live in security, and the withdrawal of Israeli armed forces from the territories occupied in the recent conflict, I'm still quoting, and the termination of all claims or states of belligerency and respect for an acknowledgement of the sovereignty of territorial integrity and political independence of every state in the area, and their right to live in peace within secure and recognized boundaries, free from threats or acts of violence. That United Nations Resolution 242 is a foundation for any possibility of peace in the future. These exact words have been accepted and reemphasized by Israel at Camp David in 1978 and in Oslo in 1993. But permanent settlements have been considered by some as, quote, creating facts on the ground, clearly designed to preclude withdrawal from the occupied territories. There were just a few hundred settlers in the West Bank and Gaza when I became president, and all my predecessors had categorized each settlement as both illegal and an obstacle to peace. After I left office, the Likud government expanded its settlement activity, precipitating a strong statement by President Reagan in September 1982, and I quote, "The Camp David Agreement remains the foundation of our policy. The United States will not support the use of any additional land for the purpose of settlements during the transition period. Further settlement activity is in no way necessary for the security of Israel and only diminishes the confidence of the Arabs that a final outcome can be freely and fairly negotiated. The United States will not support annexation or permanent control of territory by Israel. United Nations Resolution 242 remains wholly valid as a foundation stone of America's Middle East peace effort. It is the United States' position that, in return for peace, the withdrawal provision of Resolution 242 applies to all fronts." Unquote. After a major breakthrough in the peace process occurred under President George H.W. Bush and Secretary James Baker at Madrid, the President reemphasized U.S. opposition to Israeli settlements and even threatened to withhold American financial aid to Prime Minister Shamir as a deterrent. Jim Baker announced at the time, "I don't think there is any greater obstacle to peace than settlement activity." The assassination of Prime Minister Rabin in 1995 brought a tragic halt to the Oslo peace process, and Israel rejected its major premises after Foreign Minister Ariel Sharon declared it to be, quote, national suicide. Although President Clinton made strong efforts to promote peace, most notably at Camp David in 2000, a massive increase of settlers occurred during his administration. By 2001, there were 225,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank and Gaza. The best offer made to the Palestinians by President Clinton, not Prime Minister Barak, was to withdraw 20%, leaving 180,000 in 209 settlements, covering about 5% of the land. The 5% figure is quite misleading. It describes only the actual footprints of the settlements. In addition, there are other large areas that have been taken or earmarked for future expansion. Roadways that join the settlements with each other and to Jerusalem, and life arteries, so-called, that provide water, sewage, electricity, and communications. These range in width from 500 to 4,000 meters, and Palestinians cannot use or even cross many of these connecting links. This honeycomb of settlements and their interconnecting arteries divides the entire West Bank into multiple fragments, often uninhabitable or even unreachable. There are also about 100 military checkpoints completely surrounding Palestine and along the roads going into and between Palestinian communities. In 2002, President George W. Bush endorsed an Arab proposal to normalize relations with Israel in exchange for withdrawal to its own borders. And the following year, he and other members of the International Quartet reemphasized UN Resolution 242 as a basis for a permanent agreement and called for a sovereign Palestinian state side by side with Israel. Secretary of State Colin Powell stated what is still the current American position concerning Middle East peace, and I quote again, "The Palestinian leadership must end violence, stop incitement, and prepare their people for the hard compromises ahead. All in the Arab world must make unmistakably clear through their own actions their acceptance of Israel and their commitment to a negotiated settlement. Israel must be willing to end its occupation, consistent with the principles embodied in Security Council Resolutions 242 and 338, and accept a viable Palestinian state in which Palestinians can determine their own future on their own land and live in dignity and security." The PLO accepted the roadmap, and Israel also announced its acceptance, but with 14 caveats and prerequisites, some of which preclude final peace talks. Let me just list a few. First, the dismantling of Hamas, collection of all illegal weapons, and their destruction. Second, cessation of incitement against Israel. But the roadmap cannot state that Israel must cease violence and incitement against the Palestinians. Third, Israeli control over Palestine, including the entry and exit of all persons and cargo, plus its airspace and electromagnetic spectrum. I'm quoting. Fourth, the waiver of any right of return of refugees to Israel. Fifth, no discussion of Israeli settlement in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. No discussion of the status of the Palestinian Authority and its institutions in Jerusalem. And finally, no reference to the key provisions of UN Resolution 242. A major goal of my life, while in political office and since I was involuntarily retired from the White House, has been to ensure a lasting peace for the Israelis. Even before I was president, I was going to Israel, and I established personal relationships with Yitzhak Rabin, Moshe Dayan, Golda Meir, Abba Eban, and other Israeli leaders. And I learned all I could about Israel and its political and military challenges. In my first year as president, I called publicly for a Palestinian homeland, and I met personally with Rabin